So next up, very fantastic pleasure to introduce Bryan Bishop, who it's worth mentioning, but he's been single-handedly sitting back here producing all of the live transcripts that you may have been reading and seeing linked on Twitter. So yeah, take it away, Bryan.
Thank you. So I'm going to be the contrarian. I think academia is awful. It should be destroyed. Reputation, like, what is this? This is pointless. Like, you guys understand that the value of an idea is completely divorced from reputation, right? So I don't know why we're propagating reputation. Your reputation is worthless to me. So let's give some context around why I might think that. So my perspective, I actually have a bit of a slide maker's regret here. I would have done entirely different slides had I known that this is what we would be talking about. But so my perspective that I was going to bring forward here is as a Bitcoin developer. And so I work very closely with Bitcoin core developers and on other projects, mainly from that side of this ecosystem. But also I have another perspective to offer, which is more from the biotech side. There is a hobbyist group of non-institutional science of like garage genetic engineering that I've been a part of, and that's actually where I was at when Bitcoin was launched. That's what I was doing. And this is a community that recognizes that there are amazing advances available in science, and in fact, if you buy the right equipment and the right reagents, you can do all sorts of projects on your own. You don't need to go to a university lab, and you don't need to be on the manuscript treadmill or whatever. Right. So basically, I'm going to be giving an overview of some resources that are available from the Bitcoin community that you may not be aware of. And then, of course, I'll talk about transcripts, as was mentioned. I'll continue to talk about how terrible academia is and how wonderful Sci-Hub is, but actually it has problems too. Yeah. Oh no, my clicker. Can I have a new clicker, please? Great. OK, so in my opinion, all conferences should have transcripts. Transcripts are a wonderful way to respect your audience. We are all busy professionals. We don't have enough time, and there's too many things to see, too many talks to go to, too many conferences to go to. The logistics of conference talks and going to conferences is itself ridiculous. Like, the economic cost of going to all these conferences is quite high. As a rule of thumb, when you look at an audience at a conference, you should multiply the number of participants by like at least $1,000, and that's how much they've spent just to get there. It's probably more if you do hotel, travel, and everything else, food, whatever it may be. Right. So conferences are not all. It's not always easy to get to them. Right. So one of the things I started taking up doing a very long time ago, this goes all the way back to high school, is typing live transcripts. I happen to be a very fast typist. And this started out because I was interested in proving that the content that was being delivered in high school was awful and not worth my time. And I did that. I did that for every class for 4 years. And it turns out no one cares. So it's kind of how I felt about high school, too. So, right. I've experimented with publishing transcripts at different times. So, like, I'm a very fast typist. Like, by that I mean, like, by the time that the speaker sits down, my transcript is published. But if I wait a day or two, no one cares. Like, people find it valuable only if they have it immediately. I found that very interesting. Right. So as an example, oh, interesting. Right. This has included a lot of conferences that I personally have gone to and done transcripts for. This is just a word cloud, but essentially the point is there's a lot of transcripts available. A lot of them are from the Bitcoin development community. And I think those are particularly important because there's a lot of arcane, exotic knowledge that is completely forgotten, and it's mentioned at conferences, and it's not otherwise communicated ever. And so as a result, there's certain things that you can only learn through these conference talks that not everyone is attending. And part of the other problem is that people don't even know to attend those talks in the first place, so how are they going to learn those things that they probably do want to be learning? Anyway, in bold are some of the more interesting conferences that provide particularly helpful information, like the MIT Bitcoin Expo, Scaling Bitcoin, and something called CoreDev. Yep. Right, so this is Scaling Bitcoin is one rather large conference that started in 2015. I've done transcripts at every single one of those, and those are all available, including something called Edge Dev++, which was an initiative for training developers in Bitcoin primitives and other like basic data structures, all the way up to like more advanced concepts and proposals for the Bitcoin network. And so those are all available, as well as videos for everything as well. Right, so transcripts are interesting. People seem to like them. I get into these, not quite flame wars, but it's very competitive. People seem to like it. They take videos, they post it. So, you know, it's fun. It's not just for the purposes of knowledge collection, it's also fun. I don't know if anyone remembers Jim Carrey typing very quickly, but that's the canonical example. Yeah, I mean, people just, you know, heap praise upon praise upon praise. Oh, in fact, in that last one, if you notice, it's a recursive image now. Someone took a picture of me while they like were watching me typing. Well, I don't know. It's art, I guess. Right. So how does it work? Well, you type very quickly. I use Markdown. I use Git. I use something called IkiWiki. Right, so it's a very simple interface to just put things out on the web very quickly. Usually send out a tweet. And then also, one of the other things I do is bookmarking with command line clients. And I find this particularly useful because many of the resources in this ecosystem are just web resources. And it's hard to memorize all the URLs, so I use bookmarks. I especially like using these command line bookmarking tools because they do tag bookmarks, and then you can search for the bookmarks based off of tags, and it's just tag search. So, yeah. Right, so the fun part. So I'm sure many of you know Google Scholar. This is a query I wanted to show you. It's just kind of fun. This is excluding the site that hosts the transcripts, but then it's looking for the site that hosts the transcripts. So here are the results. One is about my human genome engineering projects. Something about FBI, they investigated us they were afraid I was doing like virus engineering or something. But then, then there's some actual Bitcoin stuff. And it turns out people do actually reference these transcripts in formal manuscripts. So that's pretty interesting. It also shows up in like patents. Like patents reference this website for some reason. Yeah, so that's just interesting. So just to give perspective on scale, I mean, this is over 10 years of typing. It's like 1.5 million words, and it's like 10 megabytes of text. So there's a lot of stuff there. If you're looking for something, if you have questions like have any Bitcoin developers considered how the fee market will work when there's no subsidy? The answer is yes, and there's like tons and tons of talks on this topic already. So like you should look at them. All sorts of questions like that. I guarantee you there's something available. One thing I would like to ask for is I'm a very busy person, and the only way that I'm able to do these transcripts is because I happen to type very quickly. And if I'm going to be at a conference anyway, such as I'm speaking here, that means I'm available, I'm watching talks, so I might as well type the transcripts. However, I can't go to all the conferences. I think people agree that this is a valuable thing to have. So I would suggest that we try to fund someone else who is not me to go to conferences to type things down very quickly. I think that would be immensely valuable. Strangely enough, court stenographers actually, it turns out they make a lot of money. They make about on the same order as software developers, or more sometimes. So that's interesting. We might be able to find someone who doesn't require that kind of salary, maybe like a student who's interested in going to a bunch of conferences. Right, so one thing I tried was someone tapped me on the shoulder once at a conference while I was typing away, and was like, Bryan, aren't you a programmer? Like, you're a really good programmer, and like, I know you type very quickly, but why not just make a machine learning program that will do speech recognition? I was like, oh yeah, okay. So then I did it, and anyway, the conclusion was that I had like a 20% error rate in word recognition, and so like 1 in 5 isn't really good. That doesn't make for legible transcripts. Turns out Mozilla eventually redid the same algorithm I used. They made a much better implementation, but both my version and their version are trained on audiobooks, and audiobooks aren't quite conferences, but you have the text and you have the audio, and so it's really good for machine learning and training. Right. One other thing I wanted to bring up was the topic of conference quality. This should be studied. As I mentioned, if you multiply the number of participants times $1,000 or $2,000, these are large economic numbers. We should be optimizing conference quality, and I don't think people really do that. The number of conferences that I go to where there are surveys before and after is like 2. I've been to 2. I've been on various program committees and Easy Chair is often used, but the way that talks are selected on Easy Chair doesn't quite make sense to me. I think we should be more carefully selecting talks. I'm actually a big fan of having someone either commission or invite specific talks. I think that's really the way to go. If you know that someone is working on something interesting in the industry, then we should explicitly ask them, please talk about this, instead of just hoping they submit something that is relevant. Right. So you may not be aware, and some of you are, but for Bitcoin development in particular, there's a few resources available. 3 that I'll mention are the IRC logs, bitcointalk.org, and the mailing list. The mailing list is currently hosted by Linux Foundation. However, they are now deprecating email, so we're trying to figure out what to do, which is very surprising to learn that they don't like email anymore. Anyway, if there is an idea, an advanced concept, or a research thought that you have, chances are that it's been thoroughly analyzed and communicated through one of these channels. The problem is that it's not like you find this on a Google Scholar search or something. So this stuff is hidden, and honestly, the process is if you want to find something in it, you either manually search through it yourself, or you go ask someone who was there at the time. Both ways work, and I encourage you to do both. In fact, one of the comments from yesterday that I heard was from one of the Bitcoin developers was like, there's a lot of talk about proof of stake here. And I don't think people generally know that like we solved that problem years ago. We figured out that proof of stake doesn't work. And like it's just like cyclical, like it comes back around. Yeah, I mean, by the way, proof of stake is reputation, right? Like it doesn't work. That's the whole idea of what proof of work is. It's unforgeably costly. Anyway. Right, so bookmarks, I mentioned the command line bookmarking tool. About 8 years ago, I lost all my bookmarks in a tragic boating accident. It was like 50,000 bookmarks. Anyway, I learned my lesson. Back up your data, it's very important. Let's skip this. One other interesting thing to speculate about, and this is entirely hypothetical, and it absolutely does not exist, but another thing that people could be doing that might help with understanding this ecosystem of advanced concepts is tracking them. One such way that one might do this would be to start tracking conversations that everyone has on like a personal level. One might do this as a Rolodex, but also as a reminder system for who the heck are these people, why do I know them, what have we talked about. This is something I've been interested in for quite a while as an entirely speculative exercise, but in my opinion, it's also quite valuable for things like, especially in the context of like the Bitcoin developer community. There's concerns that certain people have knowledge that other people don't, and there's like high bus factors in some cases, where if you get hit by a bus, that knowledge goes away. And so we should try to like shard the knowledge more appropriately, and by tracking it, you can figure out, is the sharding factor sufficiently high or not. Right. So here's my rant slide. Right. So I've already mentioned that I think academia is completely broken and should be destroyed and made illegal. I haven't actually heard a good alternative for the current system that we find ourselves in. Like, for example, I've heard today we've heard about reputation tokens. I've heard prediction markets and derivatives markets as possible solutions, like Robin Hanson always throws up his hand, or Paul Stork in this community says prediction markets, reputation markets. I'm not really sure how that really fixes anything or changes anything. It seems to perpetuate the same model, the same system as far as I can tell. I clearly don't understand the proposal for using a prediction market to fix academia. But one of the questions I have is that, okay, so you are predicting, you go out and make predictions, and then someone has to fund your prediction, but isn't the question of how do you get funding for your scientific research, isn't that the fundamental problem? And so if that's only solved by having reputation in the system, then we haven't really changed anything, as far as I can tell. Sci-Hub is great. Brief story. I may have accidentally doxed Alexandra Elbakin, who runs Sci-Hub, back in 2013. I recognized her profile picture because I met her at a conference at Harvard in 2010 where we both spoke. And I recognized her profile picture, and I said, oh, that's Alexandra. I said that in public, and I'm afraid that I may have been the cause of her identity becoming public. I really like Sci-Hub, but it does have a few problems. Namely, I've been looking for people who have a complete copy of the data set, which is about 50 terabytes. Nobody has it. I think this is an extremely important data set. Sci-Hub's the only person or the only entity that has this. Perhaps LibGen has it, but anyway, this is theoretically what librarians should be doing, but all the librarians sold out to the OCLC consortium, and they're completely spineless, and they now don't actually operate useful libraries for the modern age. Right, so I also have a rant against libraries, obviously. Right, and then we could talk about Aaron Swartz, but I'm sure you've all been beat over the head about what happened to him here. Right, so I encourage people who are researching things in blockchain to reach out to Bitcoin developers in particular. Bitcoin works, proof of work works. There's a reason why it works, and actually people have thought about it quite a lot, but it's somewhat folklore at this point. And nonetheless, folklore is still a valuable source of knowledge. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Must have generated some questions.
Hey, have you thought about indexing the IRC logs so it can be easily searched?
I haven't done that yet. I actually hate search, but yeah, I guess someone should do it. I think I'm the only person that hosts the logs at this point. There's I have hosts most of them, and then there's one or two other hosts. So yeah, I guess that's my responsibility then.
Could you talk more about your bookmarking system and why you prefer bookmarks over search?
Okay, so first of all, the command line bookmarking tool that I described actually does have search. It's just tag search. For whatever reason, I don't seem to trust search that much. I like being able to just call commands, and I like being able to have explicit tags that I know I put something under. Tags are really like a folder system, right? Except you can put it into multiple folders. I like folders. I don't like search. But that's just a personal preference. So.
I have a question. So You mentioned that Bitcoin Core developers have experimented with proof of stake multiple times and it failed. Could you elaborate more on like the efforts and the things that you guys have tried?
Well, yeah, so as you can imagine, Bitcoin developers have been barraged by every single proof of stake proposal ever, and each one seems to be broken in some way. So, I mean, it's just by a process of just getting barraged, really. As for particular simulation efforts, I can't speak to those. I'm sure someone has done them for different models of proof of stake. Okay,
Let's thank
thank
Rant
you.
again.